Beloved, the Savior calls to you. Will you follow? Christ's call persists through the clouds of doubt, fear, and worry that descend on our path. Will you follow? Jesus calls us to shift our priorities, to leave behind the baggage of prejudice and the grasping for position so that we can truly love God and our neighbors well. Will you follow? Beloved, receive this good news. You are not alone. Today we answer Christ's call together. Once, while Jesus was standing beside the lake of Gennesaret, and the crowd was pressing in on him to hear the word of God, he saw 2 boats there at the shore of the lake. The fishermen had gotten out of them and were washing their nets. He got into one of the boats, the one belonging to Simon, and asked him to put out a little way from the shore. Then he sat down and taught the crowds from the boat. When he had finished speaking, he said to Simon, "Put out into the deep water and let down your nets for a catch." Simon answered, "Master, we have worked all night long but caught nothing. Yet if you say so, I will let down the nets." When they had done this, they caught so many fish that their nets were beginning to burst. So they signaled their partners in the other boat to come and help them. And they came and filled both boats so that they began to sink. But when Simon Peter saw it, he fell down at Jesus' knees, saying, "Go away from me, Lord, for I am a sinful man." For he and all who were with him were astounded at the catch of fish that they had taken. And so also were James and John, sons of Zebedee, who are partners with Simon. Then Jesus said to Simon, "Do not be afraid. From now on, you will be catching people." When they had brought their boats to shore, they left everything and followed him. Stories about people who've lost everything seem to be everywhere. There are stories about fire. I heard a news reporter talking about the Pasadena home that he purchased only 2 months before the fire that is now gone. During his very personal report on the experience, a colleague commented, "Sometimes you go find the news, and sometimes the news comes to you." There are stories about asylum seekers who don't feel safe anywhere, wondering what will happen next and if they will have a place to call home. There are stories about war. I heard one about a man returning home. His wife and 3 daughters are gone. His parents and his home are gone. He's the only one left. What will happen next for him? Can you imagine? These stories stop us cold, and as we hear them, we wonder, what happens next for those who've lost everything? These images of a harsh and cold reality raise many questions for us, particularly as people of faith. By what do we measure our value? By what do we measure our safety? Maybe we even take a moment to think about what Jesus teaches about earthly wealth and earthly place. Because, comparatively, we have so much. Yet we ourselves are vulnerable because it seems we have much to lose. Even though we've been taught from our cradles how the grace of God works, we can't shake the feeling that there's only so much love, only so much grace, only so much stuff. And the point of life is to get a whole bunch of all of it and then figure out how to hold on to it. Where do we read that that is our purpose? as if God envisioned our lives forever hovering at the moment when a piñata bursts open and everyone is scrambling around trying to get as much as they can. I don't like Tootsie Rolls and I don't like pushing, so I usually don't bother getting into the fray. Our oldest son was always so upset that the pretty piñata was being ruined that I had to take him home generally whenever there was a piñata involved at a party. Friends, let us learn the lessons being taught all around us. Let us hear the stories being told all around us. We are so much more than that. We can picture it, can't we? Simon Peter, James and John have been out fishing all night long. They're ready to go home and get some sleep. But Jesus shows up and asks Simon Peter for the use of his boat as a floating pulpit, as one commentator says. So instead of pulling the boat up to shore, tired fishermen take Jesus aboard and go back into the water so that crowds can gather and hear from the shore what it is Jesus has to teach them. And then, after the teaching is done, which took who knows how long, then Jesus asks Simon Peter to go back out in the deep water. Imagine how tired he was. The nets were already cleaned and out of the boat. And so he says, "Master, we have worked all night, but we have caught nothing. Yet if you say so, I will let down the nets." What happens next is a sign of the power of God. Nets filled to bursting with fish that weren't there before. Imagine the boat sinking closer and closer to the waterline as so many fish were being hauled in. Another boat had to be hailed and was filled as well. So much so that these fishermen weren't just excited, they weren't just impressed. We read that they were astounded, amazed, showing a great sense of wonder for what they were experiencing. Even more than that, Simon Peter was scared to witness this display of divine power. He reacts in this way: "Jesus, go away from me. I am not worthy of this. I am a sinful man." But Jesus says, "Do not be afraid. Do not be afraid." We've heard that before, haven't we? Then we come to the most amazing part of all. The real proof of the impact Jesus has on these professional fishermen. I come from a family of fishermen, and I can tell you, it's one thing I've never seen happen. Exhausted fishermen have now got their boats so full of fish that they're in danger of capsizing. It's the best catch of their lives. It's going to be the talk of the town. Financial security is loaded to the brim in those boats. But the story tells us something astounding, something that amazes us, taps into our sense of wonder, and scares us a little bit. When they had brought their boats to shore, they left everything and followed him. Are you kidding me? These fishermen willingly walked away. Can you imagine? We read right past that part sometimes, like it's no big deal, and we think to ourselves, of course they followed him. They're the disciples. But normally, that would never happen, would it? Those boats full of fish are a significant testimony about the power of God. What about us? Maybe you feel like you haven't had your boats fill up with fish. Maybe you're tired and ready to go home. But we've also heard some stories about the power of God, and we can't help but notice when we are afraid, when we are uncertain, when we are astounded, that Jesus shows up. Even when the story is worse than we ever imagined, we are not alone. Jesus shows up with gentle grace and fierce love and says, "Why don't you come with me?" Do we then, like Simon Peter and the others, embrace uncertainty to follow Jesus? Would we do something this crazy? When you hear this story, do you imagine yourself being so moved by those bloated nets, by the crazy, lavish grace and power of God, that you make an unexpected choice? Maybe even a choice that leaves your friends shaking their heads. A choice that surprises you, most of all. Jesse Eisenberg wrote, directed, and stars in the recent film A Real Pain. It's about two cousins who are on a Jewish heritage tour in Poland to see where their beloved late grandmother lived before fleeing the Nazis and immigrating to the US. Each of the cousins has a different emotional reaction to the tour, which includes a stop at the Majdanek death camp. Eisenberg talks about it in a recent interview. He says Majdanek, it is in Lublin. So it's in the southeast of the country. But Lublin is this really bustling, gorgeous, vibrant college town. And 5 minutes away from this, again, gorgeous, bustling, cosmopolitan college town, is this death camp. And when I say 5 minutes, that's not a hyperbole. Like you drive 5 minutes down the road and you're in this death camp. And so it's not a real known one, but what makes Majdanek really interesting, as opposed to like Auschwitz, is that it's so far east that the Russians liberated the camp before the Nazis could really destroy it. So the other camps, as you go further west in Europe, were destroyed by the Nazis as the Soviets or the Americans liberated the camps. But this one, as we say in the movie, is kind of well preserved, for lack of a better phrase. It looks like it was liberated this morning. Eisenberg said that his grandma never pitied herself. He said that she came to see the experience of her struggle as a strength, and somehow in ways we might not be able to understand, her experience gave her access to hope. And it seems she retained her sense of humor too. Eisenberg, as David Kaplan in the movie, says, yes, in fact, his grandmother, used to tell me that, first generation immigrants work some menial job. They drive cabs, they deliver food. Second generation, they go to good schools and they become a doctor or a lawyer. And third generation immigrants live in their mother's basement, which is funny in the movie because Kieran Culkin's character, Eisenberg's cousin, lives in his mother's basement. We are all on our own journeys, for sure. Some of those journeys may involve our mother's basement. If we stick with Jesus, even when we'd like to go home and go to bed, Jesus has amazing things to show us about the power of God. Sometimes we can catch ourselves getting carried away by this world and by the piñata opened up on the floor. And we catch ourselves longing with our whole hearts for things that aren't deserving of our longing or our hearts. We acknowledge that living a life of faith is really tough. Some days we get it right, our priorities, I mean. We see God's power, those nets full of fish, and we turn our focus toward the things that matter. Some days, all we can do is to reaffirm our desire to keep working on it. Working to find tangible ways to put our faith into practice and to find ways to lean into the future God has imagined. When they landed on the beach, when Jesus said, "Why don't you follow me?" the disciples didn't say, "Now, Jesus, if you can give us a presentation that explains where you're headed next and copies of the job descriptions and benefit packages you're offering." They were astounded. The gospel says, when they had brought their boats to shore, they left everything and followed him. We too are called to follow. How then will we respond?
We hope you're enjoying Podchurch. Please take a moment to subscribe to our channel and be notified each time there's a new video. To learn more about everything that's happening in and around Marquette Hope, check out our Facebook page. You can also get our newsletter on the Facebook as well. Podchurch is the weekly online worship of Marquette Hope, a United Methodist faith community located in Michigan's Upper Peninsula. Find us at facebook.com/mqthope, mqthope.com, and on